Hey, everybody, what a night. January 19th, 2025, the Habs come back not once, not twice, but 4 times and win it in overtime 5-4 against the New York Rangers. It's time to drop the puck on Montreal Hockey Talk. Hey, everybody, Kosta here. Welcome to another edition of Montreal Hockey Talk. Normally our Sunday night broadcast, but given the fact that the Habs were taking on the Rangers in a back-to-back after that loss yesterday to Toronto, we had to watch the game first. And let me tell you, what an exciting hockey game it was. I mean, if you weren't on the edge of your seat for this hockey game, you're not human. Because through all of it, you can say the Montreal Canadiens dominated. They dominated in first and third. They bookended the game. The second period was more Ranger time, and that's why they ended up taking the lead. But early in the third, Yuri Slafkovsky driving the net, getting driven into the crossbar, scores to make it 4-4. And then in overtime, it's Patrick Laine from Caden Gooley, give and go along the left side. And finally, Laine puts it upstairs where mommy keeps the cookies. The Habs come away with a 5-4 win. 2 very important points in the race for that last wildcard spot. And if you kind of read between the lines a little bit, the Canadiens are in a place right now where you're not only talking about possibly being in a wild card, but you are talking about possibly taking one of the 3 top spots in the division because they are only 3 points behind the Tampa Bay Lightning. Granted, there are a couple teams in front of them. We'll discuss that a little bit later, but at the end of the day, Montreal is in a very good position. And you heard Brendan Gallagher, if you were watching the game at the end, when he was getting his first star and he was on the ice with Marc Denis, he wants to give the fans playoff hockey. Now, is it too much to talk about it? I don't think so, because right now everybody's heart's pumping hard. This team has won 12 of the last 16 games it's played. Okay, that's an 80% clip. That's a fantastic percentage right now for the Canadiens, bringing them right back into the mix where we all wanted them to be. But this game really didn't look like it was going to go the way it did early on. And that was part of Jakub Dobeš being a little nervous. Now, granted, the first goal was an absolutely horrible bounce off the boards into the front of the net, and bang, Alexis Lafreniere puts it home to make it 1-0. Then the second goal, and I would be remiss if I remembered off by heart who scored it, but I will get to that in a second. It was Will Cooley, who was all over the ice tonight for some reason for the Rangers. You heard his name nonstop, and that's not just because it sounds like Gooley. Cooley was on the puck all the time and causing the Canadiens fits all night, but he scored a second goal on a really stupid, crappy giveaway by Arbor Xhekaj. And the reason I say that is because you've heard me say it before. I hate flip pass clearances because when you do them right, they look fantastic. When you miss, they end up in the back of your net, and that's what happened to Arbor Xhekaj. Arbor is not David Savard, okay? He's not a veteran defenseman who will get away with screwing up a flip pass because he's got so many years of service in the league, right? Arbor Xhekaj has to be smarter with the puck. If he would have taken it and pinned it to the boards and waited for his forwards or his partner to come over in support, he would have been in a much better position. But instead, he gave it away, and Cooley put it past Dobeš to make it 2-0 early on. And, sorry, not 2-0, 2-1 early on. And, you know, when you look at it from a broader perspective, you can understand why Dobeš was nervous. It's his first game at the Bell Center. But I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But, you know, I think a lot of flowers have to be sent the way of Brendan Gallagher. He was fantastic tonight for the Habs. Scored the opening goal for the Canadiens to make it 1-1 in the first period. I mean, he assisted on Dvorak's goal, despite the fact that goal was a little bit of a fluke. And then, you know, you continue going on, and he was just all over the ice, creating chances, getting good quality scoring chances against Jonathan Quick, who he, in his own right, played extremely well for the Rangers. Probably the only reason why the Rangers were even in this game to begin with. But, you know, it's one of the things that really bothered me, too, about this hockey game and the Canadiens, and it's something that other teams may try to expose a little bit, and that is the lack of size or strength, I should say, defensively. Because Chris Kreider had his way with the Canadiens all night long. I mean, he scored the 4th Ranger goal, I mean, from right in front on a pass from Adam Fox. And, you know, he was in Dobish's face all night. The reason why Dobish didn't see the Mika Zibanejad goal was because he had Chris Kreider's ass in his face. And that's what Kreider does. We all know that we in Montreal absolutely love to hate on Chris Kreider because of what he did to Carey Price. We will never let him get away with that. The same way we didn't love Justin Williams for putting the stick in Saku Koivu's eye in 2005. I mean, there are things that Canadiens fans just don't let go of. And what Kreider did to Price is one of those things we just don't let go of. And I will say this again and again and again. In no way are you skating forwards towards a goaltender and then suddenly your feet come out and you drop kick him into his own net. All right, I don't care what Ranger fans have to say. I don't care what anybody on that side of the equation has to say. You never go skates first into a goaltender. And if you do, more often than not, because you're a sportsman, you try to get your skates out of the way so you don't hurt the guy and don't cut him. That's not what Kreider did. But I digress. Now, moving on just a little bit. The Canadiens, like I said, absolutely dominated the third period. I think it's the most entertaining third period I've seen in a very long time, not just from the Canadiens, but from a hockey perspective in general. That first 10 minutes where Slafkovsky tied the game in 4 and thereafter was so wide open by both teams, it was incredibly entertaining. And you don't want to see that hockey too often because that was the style they played back in the 80s. And, while, there was a lot of scoring and it was entertaining, it wasn't very good hockey. But if you watch it, as we did tonight, you can't help but love it. Back and forth, and both teams were getting quality scoring chances, and both goaltenders were making saves. Dobish getting a couple of goal posts to help him out as well. Jonathan Quick, I think twice the shaft of his stick saved him. So, you got to give these guys credit. They stayed with it. I mean, Jonathan Quick was absolutely incredible. He faced 38 shots tonight from the Canadiens, including overtime. And a lot of the saves that he made were of the spectacular variety, and that's what kept the Rangers in the game. But the entertainment level that we saw from the Canadiens wasn't just because the game was wide open, but you were looking at a team that really wanted to win because of what happened the night before. And that shows a lot of character. Where, in the past, another team would score after the Canadiens would push hard, and you'd see them, fold up a little bit. You didn't see that from the Canadiens. Tonight, they kept on pushing. Josh Anderson going to the locker room after hurting his leg comes back in the second period. You want to, sorry, was it the second? No, it was the third period, that he came back. You want to see that. Okay. It just shows you the compete level and the, for lack of a better term, the give a shit level of these players when it comes to the way this team is playing right now. They all want to be involved. They all want to be contributing, and they are. Whether it's Kirby Dach or whether it's Patrick Laine, even Dvorak getting a goal tonight, the list goes on and on. They're all contributing in some way, shape, or form. Now, granted, the first goal of the hockey game, again, Lane Hutson was on the ice. It was the 6th time in 8 goals at that point that Hutson was on the ice for goals against. And again, I apologize for the coughing because I am fighting off a cold. But the one thing that you want to bring out is that Hutson kept on playing hard. And you got to give him credit. As a young player, normally young players, when they make mistakes, they tend to turtle a little bit. That's not Hutson at all. And the character that he brings and the type of game that he brought tonight was sensational. He contributed offensively nonstop, getting shots on goal and distributing the puck. So those are the things you want to see, right? And I criticized him yesterday, but today, give him credit. He was on there. The goal went in, and he was pissed. And you saw he was pissed. So he did something about it. And that's what you want to, at the end of the day, what you want from your players. It's like when a player gives away a puck, what do you want to do? You want him on his horse to go and try to get that puck back. Well, it's the same thing with Hutson. He was on the ice for that goal against it. What did he do? He wanted to get back at it and be able to do something to contribute and get this team back on the right side of the ledger. And he did that in the third period when he assisted on Slafkovsky's goal to tie the hockey game up. So, all that being said, the dominance that the Canadiens showed in the third period was crazy. And it's the type of hockey that, again, you don't want to see too often. But it's good to know that when required, you know that they can get the better of another hockey team because the Rangers are a very good club when they want to play, and they came to play tonight. They came in hungry, thinking that could beat the Canadiens because of the Canadiens' history over the past couple of years, because of the fact that they absolutely obliterated them earlier in the season. That wasn't the case in this game. It looked like it would be that way based on the way Dobish started, but it isn't the way it finished. And that's kind of what you want to see. Speaking of Dobish, it was a tale of two goaltenders tonight in between the pipes for Montreal and for the New York Rangers. On the Rangers side, you had Jonathan Quick, who for years was the premier goaltender in the National Hockey League, especially in the Western Conference. He, along with Evgeny Nabokov, were absolutely unbeatable between LA and San Jose, respectively, for years. And Jonathan Quick he reminds me a lot of Mike Richter. And I don't know if you guys will agree, in the sense that when you need a huge save from him, he delivers. Richter was like that. He could bring out that big save and stretch across and do the splits. And, he reminds me of him a lot. Another American-born goaltender, so, there's those similarities there. But even at 39 years old, Jonathan Quick is so bloody flexible, it's incredible. I mean, I look at him and it hurts my groin when he slides across like that to make saves. And it looked like it hurt him tonight, because there were a couple of occasions where he did get up rather slowly after stretching across from post to post to make a save. But, at his age, you kind of expect that a little bit. On the other side of things, you had Jakub Dobish, who, despite the fact that he had won his first 4 starts with Montreal, all on the road, allowing 1 goal in each of those games, you could see he was nervous. It's his first home game, and, he's young, so let's give him a little bit of a break, Do I think it's going to continue like that for him? I don't think so. I think he's going to settle down now that he's got that first one under his belt and out of the way. And you saw that especially in overtime, where he saved the bacon when Hudson Suzuki and Caulfield were on the ice for almost 2.5 minutes of overtime, completely gassed, and the Rangers got 2 quality opportunities on the Canadian goal, and Dobish made those saves. So, despite the fact that he had a difficult beginning of the hockey game, and he looked very nervous throughout, you got to give him credit, because he did batten down the hatches when he needed to. He made big saves during the hockey game when he needed to, despite the fact that he always had traffic in his face. And I think that's really the first time at this level he's faced that kind of opposition where it's always right there in your face. And, again, I'm going to come back to Chris Kreider being right there. He's the type of guy who's going to be there and then back off to try to get a scoring chance. And so, what more can be said about the goaltending from the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Rangers? Both quality, both outstanding. Dobish did get help from a couple of goalposts during the hockey game, so, a good goaltender gets those goalposts. We saw it happen time of that, I don't know how many times, with Patrick Waugh, who used to thank his posts after every time they dinged behind him. But, do I think this is going to be positive for Dobish? I think so, because knowing that your team can pick you up despite the fact that you didn't play your best hockey, it's great, right? As a goaltender, you feel really good. And when you play your best hockey and you win, then you know that, the guys appreciate that as well. That's what happened in a couple of occasions as he started to play with the Canadiens on the road. Now at home, you saw the nervosity in his blood, and you saw how, at the end of the day, the Canadiens had his back. They absolutely made sure that they worked hard for this kid. They scored. They made sure they won in an overtime. And you know what? You got to give love up and down the lineup for that. Let's talk a little bit about the referees and their lack of, I would say, authority in this hockey game. Early on, especially when they made the call on, I forget what his name is again. Who was the guy that got into the scrap with Matt Rempe when he got into the fight with Arbor Jacki? Now, Rempe's got a reputation for getting suspended all the time, but a lot of those hits, last-minute turns, and he's young, and so you got to give him a little bit of a pass while he makes his way in the National Hockey League. But he was chasing after Jacki, and so when that fight happened and Rempe dropped the gloves first, and they gave him 2 minutes for roughing, that's where in my head I'm starting to think, if it was any other team, if it was actually Arbor Jacki that had done that, he would have gotten 2 and a game for instigating. So I couldn't understand what happened there. And then later on in the hockey game, there was an instance where Josh Anderson took a penalty in front of the opposing net because he cross-checked the defenseman, and with good reason. It was a good call. It was a cross check. It gave him an opportunity to score. That's not what you want, right? On the ensuing power play, what happened was Kreider was in front of the net and he interfered with Mike Matheson, leading to him being open for a goal. And now, it wasn't necessarily the pick that led to it. It was the fact that David Savard and Mike Matheson both started complaining to the referee before the play was done. That's a no-no as far as a coach is concerned. But all that to say that the referees, again, blew it because it led directly to a goal for the Rangers. If you're going to call it one way, call it the other. And be consistent. If you want to follow the letter of the rules, I have no problem with that. Call it. Right? There was a hit, I believe it was Gallagher along the boards, that was borderline boarding because he caught the defenseman in the numbers, partially. He wasn't completely turned around. He wasn't facing the boards, but he was turning. If that would have been called boarding, I wouldn't have had a problem with that because we've seen those get called as boarding calls before. So, you have to leave a little bit to the interpretation of the referee. That being said, there's no interpretation on a pick. It was clear as day. You could watch it on the replay and say to yourself, holy hell, Kreider absolutely bumped Matheson and knocked him down, and the puck wasn't even around them. It's the definition of interference in the rule book. No call. And it leads to what? Two guys that get pissed off. And Savard's got to stop yelling, right? He's been doing that for a lot, ever since he came back from injury, actually. He's been yelling nonstop. A couple of games ago, there was somebody that thought that he was yelling at Kirby Doc, and then you see him yelling at the referees. You see him tonight yelling at the referee when Matheson got knocked down. He's not even involved in that particular play. He just saw it and started yelling. It's not your place to yell at the Zebras, especially not during the play because you get distracted. He turned and looked at the referee, right? Completely losing where Fox is. His stick wasn't in position to cut off a pass, nothing. It was the same for Matheson. He turned to look at the ref and then didn't realize that Kreider was still behind him. Why would you do that in the middle of a play? They tell you nonstop to play till a whistle, right? So play till a whistle. Don't let the referees win because that's essentially what they're doing. They're getting involved in the play to benefit one of the two teams. And I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose. Don't get me wrong here, okay? I'm not saying that there's any type of collusion or anything to that effect, but when a referee makes a call like that on one side and he doesn't make it on the other, it tips the balance a little bit. And it makes it look like he's favoring one team over the other. Not necessarily the case, but again, that's how the optics are. If the referees were just consistent and called everything the way they should be called, or at least set a standard in a hockey game, because a lot of times they don't, right? They'll call a game one way if one team's leading, and then they'll call it another way if another team's leading. And it's ridiculous. Set a standard. You want to call obstruction, call obstruction. If you don't want to let it go. But at least, if the coach then turns around and starts yelling at you like Marty St. Louis does when he sees a call on the ice, you turn around and say, the referee can come over and say, you know what, coach, I'm being a little bit easier on interference tonight. Thank you. As long as there's a standard, right? And an understanding between coach, player, and official. Because that way you can play within the rules that the official actually puts out there for you. But if a referee is going to go from one extreme to the other and he's going to call one and not the other, that's when there's some confusion. I forget which call it was that. It was the 4-minute penalty that they gave to. Who was it again? The 4 minutes that they gave to Gooley, right when he got involved with Scheidel on the ice, right? They were both on the ice, tackling each other, and they gave Gooley an extra 2 minutes because Scheidel's helmet came off. You're in a scrum. It's bound to happen. So you give him an extra 2 minutes because the helmet came off in the scrum. Probably the stupidest rule I've ever heard. Now, I understand that they're trying to protect players, right? But at no time did I see Gooley actually make an effort to try to take that helmet off. Both guys were wrestling. Scheidel's helmet came off, and they gave Gooley an extra 2. Again, no clarity. because the league rule it's got a bunch of gray area. Make it black and white. Lid comes off, it's an extra 2. If they're in a scuffle, it's at the referee's discretion. Fine. But if you're in a scuffle, again, unless you see the guy absolutely take a headlock and move the guy's helmet off, you can't call it as if it's blatant and make it a separate penalty in that case. Call it 2 minutes for decapitation. I don't give a shit what you call it. But don't call it roughing because that's not what it was. It's the result of 2 guys being entangled. Do you see people in football getting called when, they'll lay a hit on a guy and because his head bobs and his helmet comes off, do they call him for unnecessary roughness? No, because it's a contact. Same thing when you're in a scrum. So the referees need to stop trying to be a factor in a hockey game a lot less and let the players dictate what the game is going to look like. Now, before we get to the preview of a very big hockey game coming up on Tuesday, let's take a look at the announcement by the National Hockey League of the Canadiens quarter century team. I don't know if this is the first time they've ever done shit like this. I believe it is. But anyway, they came out with the quarter century team, and here's what it looks like. Your first team, quarter century team, I should say, it is comprised of Saku Koivu, Alex Kovalev, Thomas Plekanec up front, Andrei Markov, Shea Weber, and Carey Price between the pipes. I don't think there's a person alive that would argue this lineup. Okay? You could say that Thomas Plekanec wasn't exactly the most offensively inclined player, but he was when he started his career. He was converted into that defensive type specialist afterwards because he was relied on to win faceoffs. He was out there killing penalties. So a lot of people didn't see him as an offensive threat, and his numbers reflected that as his career came towards an end. But early on in his career, he was putting up numbers, especially when he played on the wing with Alex Kovalev. When he played at center with Alex Kovalev. So those first 6, I have no issue with. One thing that I did hear tonight, though, from somebody on RDS was that they were kind of surprised that David Desharnais was not part of these 2 teams, right? This being the first team, the second team. I'm going to show you in a second. Let me explain something to you about David Desharnais. David Desharnais was the product of the success of somebody else on the second team, and that is the guy you see in the middle, Max Pacioretty. All right? If there was no Max Pacioretty, David Desharnais would never be in the National Hockey League. Mark my words. He was a good player. He was a good playmaker, but he wasn't more than that. Okay? He didn't bring anything else to the table. A lot like a guy like Jonathan Drouin. Good scorer in junior, didn't bring anything else to the table. Now, if we look at the second team, again, I don't think there's an argument to be had when you look at these guys. You got Brendan Gallagher, Max Pacioretty, Nick Suzuki. Suzuki, obviously better. Brendan Gallagher, obviously better than David Desharnais, and Max Pacioretty, of course, better than David Desharnais. So the next time somebody on RDS decides to turn around and say, I'm kind of surprised David Desharnais wasn't there, take a look at the 6 players that were selected, jackass, and then shut up. How's that? Then on defense, Sheldon Surrey, an absolute bomb on the power play, was the biggest threat the Canadiens had on the power play for almost the entirety of his stay here in Montreal. You had PK Subban, who, a lot of us wanted to stay in Montreal. A lot of people didn't want him to stay because of his attitude, whatever the case is. The guy could ball. And then there's Jose Theodore, who, just like Carey Price, won all the hardware back in the day. So, is there an argument to be had between these 2 lineups that were picked? I don't think so. If you want to say something, put it in the comments. Let me know if you think somebody else. And don't say David Desharnais. I don't want to hear his name. I don't want to see his name. Don't even type it up. There was a time on Montreal Hockey Talk that taking a Desharnais was actually going to the bathroom. So let's leave it at that. I don't want to hear about Desharnais. But if there's another player between 2000 and 2025 that you think should have been in this lineup, put your argument out there. Give us something to talk about. Now, finally, let's get back to what's going to happen on Tuesday. And that is the Montreal Canadiens are going to host the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Lightning currently sit in 3rd place in the Atlantic Division. Now, the Canadiens are at 50 points. Tampa Bay is at 53. Tampa Bay also has 2 games in hand. But in front of the Canadiens right now are the Ottawa Senators at 52 points And I believe at 51 points, it's the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, the Canadiens are right there in the mix. You beat Tampa, you leave them at 53 points. You go up to 52, and all of a sudden, that gap kind of shrinks a little bit, right? Obviously, you want to see what happens with the Senators. They've been playing back and forth hockey since their 6-game winning streak. And Columbus is kind of hard to gauge. So, sometimes they play well, sometimes they don't. And it's kind of the same thing with the Montreal Canadiens. But anyway, the Canadiens right now still remaining on a heater as far as I'm concerned. So it's a big game on Tuesday. I'd like to see the Canadiens win it. Will they? I don't know, because they always seem to have trouble with Tampa Bay and the way they play. But Tampa does not have Steven Stamkos anymore. Braden Point is not playing exactly the same way as he did previously for Tampa. They don't have Alex Killorn anymore. So the look of the team has changed, but the way they play under John Cooper has not. They're always competitive. They're always tough. So it remains to be seen whether or not Montreal is actually going to do anything positive against Tampa. I hope so, because they did beat them in Tampa recently. So, there's always that. But you never know with the Lightning, because they run hot and cold recently, and it's a very hard team to gauge. Andrei Vasilevsky, will he give them stellar goaltending? If you stop Nikita Kucherov, will the other guys on the team pick up the slack? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's hard to say. But hopefully, Sam Montembeault gets back in between the pipes, because he's going to start that game. And he plays better than he did the other night against Toronto. Against the Toronto Maple Leafs, he did not have a good hockey game. He did when he played Tampa the last time they were down there, so there is that. But Sam's got to get back to what he was doing before, staying between the pipes, not overcommitting to shots, staying square to the shooter, and anticipating those cross-crease passes. If he does that, he's effective, and he can win the hockey game. If he doesn't do that, then Tampa's going to exploit it. And if Tampa exploits it, the Canadiens are in trouble. We'll see what happens, but that's going to be on Tuesday night. Thanks for following all week. Keep getting those subscriptions up, guys. I appreciate every single one of you. Keep putting it to the comments, and go Habs go.